Well,
So
I can streamline this really quickly because the
I don't have to do
narrative,
it quickly.
well, I mean, really, the narrative in the discussion is not really on point because that's the one of the objectives is to keep it from being on point because it's sensitive and it's not often talked about. To be candid, there is a very uneasy detente between Egypt, Israel, and Saudi Arabia and the United States. And that is delicate. They don't like what's happening in Iran, but because of the Islamic Jewish thing, they can't be too open about it. The U.S. depends upon them as very strong proxies to offset what the former Soviet Union, now the Russians, are up to, and the People's Republic of China. So there is a play game in there. Now, the Gulf War showed this, the 1 and 2 in 1990 and then in 2003. What happens is that there is a support for what we are doing to maintain stability and progress in the area. But if Israel gets involved in something, then what happens is everybody that's nominally sympathetic to what they're doing to control the more, shall we say, radical factions in the area, which are no good to anybody, the more delicate the position comes. So the United States actually, in a political science analysis, steps in and takes the heat so that people can work behind the scenes for us. We still owe Iran a lot of payback for capturing our embassy back in 1980, 79 and 80, and holding our embassy employees and representatives hostage for months. So there is that. And the preemptive thing is ancient. It's 220 years old for the United States. And if anybody knows what simplify means, anybody knows where URA is about, or let's cut to the chase, the Marine Corps hymn, there's a line in there that says, from the halls of Montezuma, that's the Mexican-American War, to the shores of Tripoli, that's the 220-year-old thing. The United States built some naval warships, one of which, the Constitution, is still in commission in Boston Harbor. And they sent the Marines in an expedition over there to deal with what was happening in the Mediterranean in a preemptive fashion because what they called the Barbary pirates were drastically interfering with American commerce in the area. So we prevailed, we conquered, the Marines got glory, and it's still in their hymn, and it's a precedent that's 220 years old to do exactly what's being done right now. Now, the other thing that is not being mentioned is this. The Biden-Harris administration had open borders, and as I've been saying, they have been infiltrated by representatives of Hamas, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and all of this stuff, and they have planted explosives. So the preemptory strike was to take out the core radical leadership that might give the order to, say, flip the switches and blow it up. And also, since it was successful, the mission was to take out the Ayatollah at the top and some of his leadership cadre. Those that are left have a warning now that says this is what we can do when we're not trying. So if you're still thinking about flipping this switch or these switches, think about it 3, 4, 5 times before you do it because you won't like it. So it's a preemptive strike to keep 911 2.0 from happening, which intelligence analysts are saying was on the verge of going down. So if you think 911 was bad, where 3,000 people lost their lives, what would have been going on would be the equivalent of 911 in quite a few cities at the same time. It would have been a disaster.
Well, let
So
me.
that's immediate defense. And those two things have not been discussed at any length, if at all, in the popular press.
So President Trump said the United States and Israel launched major combat operations against Iran on February 28th after the largest buildup of American power in the Middle East since 2003, U.S.-led invasion of Iraq. Trump also called the Iranians to overthrow their government. Explosions were observed in Tehran and at least 5 cities across the country, and Iran's military started retaliating against Israel, according to the Israeli Defense Forces. There were also explosions and siren alerts reported in several Middle East nations where the U.S. has military bases. The Pentagon has named the operation against Iran Epic Fury. Israel's military code named it Roaring Lion. Israel initially launched the operation and then was joined by the U.S. The explosions in Tehran were reported early in the morning Eastern Time, February 28th, which is mid-morning in Iran. Now, I wanted to play the clip that, listen,
That is true. What you're reading, that seems to actually be going on, and it's not AI generated. But go ahead.
Right. And so this is the video that Trump, he was transparent. He spoke to the nation February 28th. I'm going to play a couple of, it's 8 minutes. I don't want to play the whole thing, but I'll play a couple of minutes of it, okay?
A short time ago, the United States military began major combat operations in Iran. Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime, a vicious group of very hard, terrible people. Its menacing activities directly endanger the United States, our troops, our bases overseas, and our allies throughout the world. For 47 years, the Iranian regime has chanted death to America and waged an unending campaign of bloodshed and mass murder, targeting the United States, our troops, and the innocent people in many, many countries. Among the regime's very first acts was to back a violent takeover of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, holding dozens of American hostages for 444 days. In 1983, Iran's proxies carried out the Marine barracks bombing in Beirut that killed 241 American military personnel. In 2000, they knew and were probably involved with the attack on the USS Cole. Many died. Iranian forces killed and maimed hundreds of American service members in Iraq. The regime's proxies have continued to launch countless attacks against American forces stationed in the Middle East in recent years, as well as U.S. naval and commercial vessels in international shipping lanes. It's been mass terror, and we're not going to put up with it any longer. From Lebanon to Yemen and Syria to Iraq, the regime has armed, trained, and funded terrorist militias that have soaked the earth with blood and guts. And it was Iran's proxy, Hamas, that launched the monstrous October 7th attacks on Israel, slaughtering more than 1,000 innocent people, including 46 Americans, while taking 12 of our citizens hostage. It was brutal, something like the world has never seen before. Iran is the world's #1 state sponsor of terror and just recently killed tens of thousands of its own citizens on the street as they protested. It has always been the policy of the United States, in particular, my administration, that this terrorist regime can never have a nuclear weapon. I'll say it again. They can never have a nuclear weapon. That is why in Operation Midnight Hammer last June, we obliterated the regime's nuclear program at Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. After that attack, we warned them never to resume their malicious pursuit of nuclear weapons, and we sought repeatedly to make a deal. We tried, They wanted to do it. They didn't want to do it. Again, they wanted to do it. They didn't want to do it. They didn't know what was happening. They just wanted to practice evil. But Iran refused, just as it has for decades and decades. They've rejected every opportunity to renounce their nuclear ambitions, and we can't take it anymore. Instead, they attempted to rebuild their nuclear program and to continue developing long-range missiles that can now threaten our very good friends and allies in Europe, our troops stationed overseas, and could soon reach the American homeland. Just imagine how emboldened this regime would be if they ever had and actually were armed with nuclear weapons as a means to deliver their message.
So, did you want me to play the rest of it, or is that?
No, you don't have to play the rest of it. Let me say this. That's quite accurate, and a lot of people are calling that an exaggeration, but it's not. And those are things that are political, diplomatic realities that have to be addressed that most people don't want to deal with. There is one big problem with this whole mix, and it's caused some great sacrifice on behalf of the country, and it's this. We don't have enough ammunition to really do what's necessary because the Obama administration and then the Biden administration took the money that was allocated for other purposes and used it for social experiments. So our ammo load, our magazine full of bullets is empty. We have the problem with Taiwan looming in the next couple of years that'll have to be addressed relative to the People's Republic of China. And we have some other things in our stock of cruise missiles, our anti-aircraft missiles, and other batteries are running low on ammo because the Biden-Harris, and then before that, the Obama administration cut back production. The Obama administration cut back production and stopped it really, they stopped it of the F-22 air superiority fighter, probably the best in the world, but we have less than 120 operational, which is not really what we need, but you can lay that to the feet of Barack Obama, who signed an order to terminate production of that. So our cruise missile inventory is down, anti-aircraft missiles are down, and we are marginal because it takes a while to build these complex and very expensive items. And one of the things we've been relying upon right now, our production is 120 of them.
Testing. Can you guys hear me? I don't know what is your audio. Stop. Your audio is off.
Oh, it says choose another phone number to call so. Okay, we can't. Sometimes I found that if you're on a regular phone call, you can switch it to FaceTime if the other person's system is receptive. So anyway, you can hear me, but
yeah,
problem is that we have a very bad situation where this isn't really for the stated purposes, because I would imagine that the way things work, you might want to keep the other side guessing as to what's really going on. And it's a good opportunity to not scare the hell out of some people, because how would it sound? He'd either be a crank in the eyes of the blue side, or other people who are conspiracy theorists would get all freaked out if the president says we are in grave danger of 911 2.0 because these people that Biden-Harris allowed in the country have planted explosive devices that we are trying to use ICE and other methodologies to discover so we can get them disarmed or neutralized and not lose many times more of our citizens than happened in 911 25 years ago. The other thing is these people have no qualms about taking life. that were the subject of the attack. The Ayatollah himself ordered the slaughter of up to 40-some thousand of his own people just a month and a half ago out of them protesting.
Right. That is true.
And that needs to be taken into context. So if you're going to kill 30 to 40,000 of your own people, what would they do when it comes to us?
So,
and by the way, that's in line with the United States trying to spread democratic methodologies around the world.
So now the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, I hope I'm saying his last name right. He was
Ali Khamenei.
Ali Khamenei. He's dead.
He got killed.
Right.
And some of his top staff too. See, what you have, Ayatollah Khamenei, the one that started this revolution back in the 70s, died, I think it was 1989. And what happened, the background for Iran was that the Shah, who was the ruler of Iran for a while, had put Iran on a course to westernize and become progressive. So the Ayatollahs were, for religious reasons, badly offended by this blasphemous behavior, and they imposed a religious tyranny upon the country. And one of the things that I saw that was interesting was the Iranic women tearing off their burqas. The other thing that I noticed that was interesting is affairs right here down in Miami, where Jews and Arabic persons are jointly celebrating, because a lot of people did not like this kind of repressive thing, which is what I've been warning people about here when I say there is a cult that is being imposed with the collaboration of the Democratic Party, where if you deviate even slightly from their dogma, you get severely punished. That's why we had such a bad reception just a few minutes ago. Our circumstances, rather than the reception was so bad a little while ago. They want to censor what you do, and typical of that side, you blame the others that you're trying to censor for being the ones responsible. And it's not good for the country.
Well, I want to ask you this question.
This is what we are doing.
I want to ask you this question because will this move that the U.S. is doing with Israel, well, i.e. Netanyahu, will this define Trump presidency and his legacy? Good or bad? Because if he fails, if you don't quote unquote win, or even if you win but you drag it out, that's not good. You're going to end up losing the midterms for the Republicans. So,
but you won't drag it out because there's no intent to invade. That is the key. In other words,
he mentioned that it could possibly, Pete Hestach did mention it could possibly be boots on the ground, possibly.
Yeah, but that's a raid. Iran is too big for us to send an occupying army over. Really too big. So it's not feasible. That's what happened in Gulf War I. George Herbert Walker Bush was wise enough with Colin Powell and Schwarzkopf to say, we're going to come in there, beat the crap out of them, and get out. The point has been made. George W. Bush had another objective, which was to get his family company, Halliburton, the oil contracts over there, which they stayed around until they were able to get that and start generating somewhere between $7 and $8 million net every 7 hours by 2007. Made the family filthy rich for the next few generations. But in any event, we don't have to go over there and conduct anything other than a raid, and our professional troops are not draftees. They signed up for it, and we've been having small-scale raids with SOCOM, Special Operations Command, through Rangers, through Special Forces, through Navy SEALs, and other special units for years. So it's nothing new. That's just what is done. And the other thing, see, when it comes down to they didn't get war declared. Well, Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution, amongst other things, says it is the duty of the commander-in-chief, that's the president, and the armed services to pursue, eradicate, and suppress piracy wherever found in the world. It also says in that same article, it is also the president's responsibility to, quote, enforce the law of nations. And what is being done in Iran is contrary both to the law of nations as various treaties and diplomatic agreements have attested to. And also, since Iran is a financial basis behind hijackings, terroristic activities, we have treaties that declare those things to be acts of piracy. The hijacking of the 4 airliners used in 911 has been declared by treaty to be piracy. And Article 6 of the Constitution says ratified treaties are part of the supreme law of the land and must be enforced not only by federal but by state judges. So that being the case, we have ample precedent that says what's going on is not your traditional war. It is piracy, or it is already established as something that there is an obligation to suppress through Article 1, Section 8 by international law. So Trump is on all fours doing what he's doing. And in addition, he is actually defending the United States' immediate interest by taking out the head of the operation that could have flipped the switches on these already planted explosive devices for 911 2.0. And also to send out a warning, a deterrent to those who might still have access to giving the orders and saying, blow them up, and saying, you don't really want to do that, do you?
So let me
and then there's also the likelihood there'll be a regime change.
So let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. I don't want to get into, I'm going to ask you about the regime change in a minute, but I want to ask you this though. Was this a good move for Trump to do? And do you think this will be a victory, for him? Was it a good move?
Yes, it was. And you know why it was a good move? Because the U.S. for the last 20-something years has been looked at as bluffing. Been talking a good game and ain't doing nothing about it since the Gulf War. And that is looked at internationally as, oh, we know what that was. The president at the time and his successor had a financial interest in the company that profited from this, and that's what started because they didn't get the bid for the oil contract, meaning Halliburton. And Obama, Dick Cheney, and George W. Bush were all family related cousins, and their uncle or great uncle Herbie started Halliburton, so they got benefit of that fortune.
Right.
And the world knows that, though America seems to be unaware of it for the most part.
So for you, so we're just going to put that aside. I want to go back to Iran and the regime change, right? Do you think that this war that's going on now will lead to Iran having another regime change?
Quite possibly. It has probably been accompanied by some clandestine information sent out to resistance groups that the United States will back you with communications organization, supplies, and weapons and ammunition. And that would give them an opportunity to rise up. You've got a median age in the low mid 30s over there in Iran, and that encourages an energy reservoir of those who are needed to pull off a regime change or a revolution. That's a good thing. And remember, this place is an area where years ago, it was on the forefront of westernization in the Mediterranean. The Shah was trying to bring Iran into the fold of Europe, Asia, and the Americas in terms of being advanced and getting more secular. So you have a bunch of people who are being oppressed to get them to go along with what's going on because they get snatched out of their homes after midnight and never seen again.
Iran. So I want to point to this: Iran's power in the Middle East, because Iran was supplying Dubai, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, all of those other Middle Eastern countries, with food trade, dates, oil, and stuff like that. So Iran is a major power player and stronghold of the Middle East. So
it wasn't supplying Saudi Arabia with fuel. Saudi Arabia was a place that was independent of that pressure.
Other trades.
But military pressure, is extreme. Iran has been a fanatical regime that has been led by religious fanatics. And it has put a lot of its money in weaponry and being able to raise hell, so to speak, without concern with how that may have negatively impacted the citizenry. So Iran is a factor that a lot of entities in the Middle East have to put up with. That's why I said there is a delicate détente over there where Israel, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and through them other entities will not shoot each other because they have a problem that is a worse one with Iran. Mm-hmm. Now, that being the case, everybody's got a vested interest in keeping Iran down, so we're not offending any of our other Arab allies by doing what we did. They're glad we're willing to take the blame, take the heat, so to speak. Big Brother has stepped in to take the heat.
Because other Middle Eastern countries or Arab countries were rely on Iran for certain trades, dates, and other things. However, we do business with Saudi Arabia, we do business with Qatar, we do business with them. So I think with the US, Israel coming into Iran, going to war and winning will benefit the surrounding Middle Eastern countries, correct? Because we already doing business with them, so we don't have to rely on Iran.
The young monarch in Saudi Arabia was not supposed to hold that position. There was another sheikh that had worked out a deal with his father where he was going to be the high king. But that person, by the way, is interesting because he had dual citizenship. He was also a citizen of the United States, born here in the United States, went from kindergarten through grad school in California at public schools. His wife was an American citizen, and so were all of his children. Mm-hmm. And that person was likely to be the High King of Saudi Arabia, and he also ran the counterintelligence section of the Saudi espionage units. So he, by the way, was the one that was on that airplane that left the day after 9/11 that some were hollering should have been detained. So you don't want to detain an American citizen who's high up in the Saudi government and is running counterintelligence in a fashion that greatly benefited the United States, and who, by the way, had already warned the U.S. that 9/11 was about to occur. So that's an interesting thing. To see these things don't fit in with political drama and political showtime. So they aren't talked about. They shouldn't be talked about. But too many of the pundits and whatever get in with the cliches, the versions that have been intentionally put out there for the ignorant to focus on. Mm-hmm. And when I say ignorance, I'm just talking about in the technical sense right here of lack of knowledge, information, and understanding.